I'm very happy to see that so many people are attending. It's more than 30 people already now being in, even more have registered. In Corona times, assuming that most of you have the choice between staying in home office or being outside and enjoying summer weather, it's quite nice that you chose the first option, learning something about the data excellence model. And actually, it is two hosts today, which will guide you through the data excellence model. The first one is my dear colleague, Christine Legner. She's professor at the University of Lausanne and the academic head of the Competence Center Corporate Data Quality. Hello, Christine.
Hello from my side and welcome.
Let's continue. It is, as said, two hosts today. First one is Christine. Second one is me. My name is Tobias Pentek. I co-host together with Christine the Competence Center, and actually I'm responsible for our community, for management of our community. So if you do have any questions around the CDQ, our Competence Center, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. For today, as said, we would like to focus on the data excellence model, and actually today is a webinar, and it's the first webinar of a series of webinars around insights and good practices, which were all developed and gathered in the Competence Center. So there will be 2 more webinars coming on data strategies and data catalogs. If you haven't registered yet, you're more than welcome to do so. For today, we would like to focus on the data excellence model, and actually we do have 3 objectives for the session for the next 30 minutes. First of all, we would like to make you familiar with the model, and you should learn why it is essential to use in general a data management framework. Secondly, you should understand which aspects you need to consider in your data management activities. And thirdly, you should also discover how to apply the data excellence model in practice, and meaning how to assess, develop, and improve your data activities. Having said this, let's get started. Let's answer the first question. Why is it essential to use a data management frameworks? As data managers, we actually are facing all a quite complex environment. Typically, multinational organizations and enterprises have different divisions, different functions, different business units, and they all have a common interest in data, which needs to be to some certain degree aligned. And actually, it's not only about having silos in the divisions, it's about having some joint approaches, having some joint understandings, having some joint interests in data, and these have to be aligned. And actually, you could somehow categorize these drivers into 3 categories. First one is, well, we all know that data is a strategic asset. What does it mean? Well, data is a key ingredient for new business models, so data-based products or services. Data can be used for better decisions in the sense of data-driven insights, reporting and controlling, and data also facilitates operational excellence. That's the first category where data is very useful, but which is also a driver for having a common and enterprise-wide data management approach. Secondly, we all see that companies are somewhat evolving. There's always some changes in companies, meaning, well, companies do merge, they acquire or divest some of their business activities on the one hand. On the other hand, if we take a rather technical perspective, there's also some IT consolidations going on. And all these changes also have an impact on data and data management activities. And as a third group of typical drivers for having an enterprise-wide data management approach, we see more and more that data is really crucial for reducing uncertainty and avoiding mistakes. What does it mean? Well, data is important for risk management. Data plays a key part in compliance, data privacy, security aspects, meaning there's a lot of regulations out there which somehow even require us to have a company-wide approach towards data management. And that complex environment challenges all of us in data management and typically has some questions which we all need to answer. First of all, well, where should we start when we implement data management? And when we've started, what are supporting concepts and methods which help us? Where should we focus on? There's so much we can talk about when we talk about data and data management, and what are the key and critical things which we have to keep an eye on. Then also, we do not have to reinvent the wheel. What are good practices out there in the market, in the industry, which help you? And also what is very important is, well, knowing to understand where you stand, how good, how mature you are with regards to your data activities, and also knowing where you stand in comparison to others from which you can learn from. And all these questions typically can be answered by data management frameworks. And I do not tell any new insights to you that it's not only the data excellence model from CDQ, but that there's a lot of data management frameworks out there in the corporate world. You might have heard about DAMA's data management wheel or the DECA model from the ADM Council, for example. If you're aware of these, or if you have applied these in your company, then congrats, because all of these models somehow help you to structure your data management activities and also help you to keep an eye on organizational, but also on technical enablers. I think we do have some reason to say that the data excellence model has something new, has an innovative twitch in it, has something which we regard as superior, and I'm quite sure that you will understand over the next 30 minutes what that is. However, if you have the other ones, good start, and I think that that's very valid, because all of these models have some very good and valid points, because every well-designed data management framework helps us as data managers to, first of all, define and agree on basic terms. What does it mean? We all have a joint understanding. We all have a common terminology, which helps us to communicate consistently in the company. So everyone knows what we're talking about and everyone understands the same behind that very certain definition. It also helps us to understand what we should focus on, it's the design areas, but also understand what should be out or what should be the outcome of good activities in data management. It helps us to share and build some knowledge around good practices. And at the end of the day, most of the data excellence models or most of the data management frameworks also help us to assess somewhat the maturity and guide us away to improving and to become excellent in data management. The data excellence model, as said, is our approach towards supporting data managers and structuring, having basic terms and ideas, communicating, defining the design areas, understanding good practices, and also assessing the maturity. And actually that data excellence model is nothing which we just invented out of our few heads, but it is something which has been designed and developed in the Competence Center for Corporate Data Quality. And actually, the Competence Center is a research program and a network of data experts, which was already founded in 2006. So it dates back 14 years ago. As of today, it has 20 member companies, large multinational companies who all are quite mature in their data management activities. And it is moderated by researchers from two universities, from the University of Lausanne and the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. And actually all these researchers and companies have in common that they strive for innovation in data management and that we all aim for bringing data management to the next level. And actually the data excellence model is one of several ideas, several methods and concepts which we apply in our own activities in the Competence Center, but which is also applied at many of our member companies. And how this is done and what the key aspects of the data excellence model are will be now presented by Christina.
Okay, I'm happy to guide you through the second part. And this is related to the aspects that you need to consider in data management activities. And these are presented in the data excellence model. So if you look at the data excellence model, basically it has a visual appearance that is similar to an eye. And in the middle of the eye is a data strategy. And that's basically the plan how you would use data in the company. And it has several areas. So on the left-hand side, you see the goals. In the middle, the enablers. So the 6 ones that you see in the middle. And on the right hand, the results. And all of that is linked in continuous improvement. So if you look at typical data management frameworks, being DAMA, being also the capability assessment model, for example, you always find a situation that managing data in a company is not only a technical task. So it does not only require the right applications or architecture, but it also requires organizational guidance. It requires people that are trained, new roles and responsibilities, and also processes. So this is in the inner circle, the enablers that you typically find in many of the other frameworks. What is perhaps a little bit different is that we have this green outer parts, which are the goals and the results, and which link our data-related activities to the general business strategy and the results that the business, but also the data experts and data communities inside the companies have to deliver. And this is perhaps one of the innovations that I would like to highlight here. The other innovation compared to others is that we have seen that data management is not a project. It's more a program. It's typically an endeavor that takes a long time, and there's more kind of transformation into a more data-driven way of working, but also a way that requires a solid foundation. So in that regard, we always think about continuous improvement here, and you cannot do everything at once, but you have to develop in stages. And if you want to develop, you need to have a big picture. So you have to somehow address the different pieces that you see here in the data excellence model, but perhaps not at once. So you pick 2 or 3, and then you continue with others. But on the long term, and this we can really refer to many companies that have been active and had worked on data management and professionalizing the way they treat data, ensuring data quality. They typically take quite a staged approach and several years of working on the topic. So if we go one step further, so what are the goals? Typically, the difficulty is that there are a lot of ideas what you could do with data. And in the past, it was relatively easy. Data was mainly there to automate and integrate business processes in the company. It required perhaps master data, management capabilities, and so on. But now, if we have increasingly business or more business models that rely on data, and for example, we have products or that integrate sensors and produce a lot of IoT data that afterwards we are going to analyze, obviously the impact on our data management capabilities is quite significant. So we have to develop different skills than just data management skills for transactional systems, ERP systems, and the typical master data and transactional data. So it's important if you start a data management or in general for data management to understand the business capabilities, the role that data plays, and the data management capabilities. And once you understand that, you can actually work on the different, or you can document data strategy, and then you can work on the different enablers that you find in all the other data management frameworks typically, as well as in ours, and that are organizational and technical enablers. So I already mentioned them roughly. So, and I will come back to a selection of these capabilities. On the right side, at the end, we do not manage data just because it is fun to do so, but because it also makes sense from a business value perspective. And this is what you find on the right-hand side. So oftentimes companies have quite a hard time to explain. I mean, they have a sense that data is valuable, a valuable resource that creates value, but it's important to very clearly demonstrate that link and afterwards also justify that. And we know that more and more companies are not only monitoring basically perhaps data quality, but also the value that they get out of data. So this is the results sections. So you see here, it's a typical management cycle. I identify goals, I work on enablers, and I should afterwards achieve certain results. And in addition, this happens in a continuous improvement cycle. That is basically this gray circle that you see here. So the data excellence model, as you have seen, has these building blocks. And each of these building blocks is documented in a specific way based on the experience from the companies. And here is an example of that. So for example, the data excellence piece here is typically, or is typically starting with an excellence statement that characterizes a mature organization. Then we have a couple of success factors, so that describe what companies actually do to be excellence. And then we have certain recommended practices. And in the body of knowledge of the competence center, we typically have also described in very details what deliverables your activities in a specific area should provide. That could be a concept, it could be a role model, it could be a data strategy, and the supporting methods. However, we are not going to focus too much on that in this webinar, but we are more explaining you the general structure for 4 selected building blocks of the data excellence model. So the first building block that is quite essential is the data strategy. You have seen this is the eye, in the center of the eye that depicts the data excellence model. And what we have found is that excellent organizations, so the more mature organizations, typically define and implement a data strategy that explains on the one hand side how data generates business value, and on the other hand also creates a data foundation. And this is not something, a data strategy is typically something that is also known inside the company. So, and that is acting as a kind of guideline. So you see here in the success factors, for example, that the vision and mission for managing and using data are developed and communicated. This is a typical success factor in this building block. We also see a success factor is that some top managers are personally involved in defining and implementing the data strategy. And a third success factor, for example, is that this data strategy is integrated in a corporate management system. You also see on the right-hand side one of the concepts and tools that we have developed to help developing data strategy. This is the data strategy canvas. I'm not going to explain it in details here. There will be a separate web session or webinar also on this topic. You have seen here some of the principles that the data management framework provides for data strategy. I would like to move to a next one. When we think about data management, oftentimes the term governance is mentioned. And actually, governance means that you define roles and decision rights on data inside the company. And an important enabler here are our building block, people, role, and responsibilities. So what is an excellent organization doing? So they maintain a data-driven culture, but they also develop, manage, and leverage employees and their skills with regard to data. And what does that mean more specifically? So typically we have to define very specific roles for data. For example, we know that there has to be some owner of data. So typically in the business side, we may have some steward that help these owners that perhaps are not data specialists in managing the data, for example, measuring quality or also working on improving data quality. We may need, for example, a chief data officer who is at the C-level, a person that is responsible for. And one of the success factors, or the first success factor that you see on the left-hand side, is really that these roles are defined. What we also see is ideally, I mean, data management cannot be done in a central way, but it's important to have a central group that coordinates and facilitates some data-related activities. Otherwise, you will not be able to drive these activities to establish common semantics about data or to ingest high-quality data in a data lake without driving someone at an enterprise-wide level. There are other success factors. Of course, we have many more traditional organizations that are not aware, or we have a lot of people that are not really data literate. So this is another factor, and you have to work on really empowering them to assume also certain responsibilities for data. This is a very important building block in the data excellence model. You see on the right-hand side, sorry, some excerpts from a role model that we have developed in the competence center. That is also a tool to go further and develop that specific area. So the next building block that I would like to present is something that is called data applications. So we all know that we have a lot of applications, and rather too many than too few, and all of them store data. But in order to make data available to other applications, but also to users that would like to analyze them and use them, we have to think also about or implement applications that help companies to manage data and use data. And these are, I have 4 examples here. Our first one is basically more kind of application landscape planning. So you cannot do data management without understanding where data resides. And you may also need to make some changes to improve and optimize the way how data flows inside a complex application landscape. Typically, what this involves is the second success factor. That is, for example, you have a data management tool, master data management system, where you keep core data objects as enterprise-wide reference, a so-called golden record. You can also have additional tools, typically, that you implement that help you measuring and analyzing data quality as an example. So typical data quality tools. And the third category of tools, and you see that on the right-hand side, are data catalogs, which are an important emerging class of applications that make data available throughout the company to different groups that would like to use them. So this is typically one of the examples of activities that you would have in the data applications, for example, that you decide for implementing a data catalog that comprises a glossary and descriptions of the data sets and the data core data entities that you would like to be used by the remaining organizations. But where, for example, someone who wants to use this data also finds responsible persons. Okay, let's move to the next part, which is basically on the right-hand side now. We have talked about the results. So basically here, these building blocks are about data excellence and business value. And you can concentrate a little bit around the graphics here. It's all about actually measuring also how good or bad your data is and communicate that to all stakeholders. But that's not the only thing. Probably for most companies, if they start at the level of satisfaction with the quality is quite low. So it's also important to monitor and show some progress. And last but not least, and this is also very interesting and relates to what I said before, it's important to actually show that data can create value. For example, by acquiring new customer because you know them better, or for example, by implementing data science use cases, or by just working on quality. But this reporting and making things that are intangible more tangible to the entire company is quite important in data management activities too. So with that, I have given you an overview of some of the building blocks of the data excellence model, not all, obviously. And I would like to move to the next part of or the last part of this webinar. How can you actually apply the data excellence model in your data management activities? And here I would like to show you some examples of the companies that have used the model. So we are not completely sure how many companies have used the data excellence model, but we did a rough estimate. So with our 14 years of history and the many companies that have been trained also in the model, the many partner companies in the competence center, but also consulting projects and other projects that have been run not by us, but by others, we think that there are at least 100 companies that have applied it. And we have analyzed a little bit how they use it. And there are 4 typical ways. The first way is actually to create an own company-specific framework. So when you do a larger data management initiative or data initiative in a company, like the ones that many large companies are doing at the moment, you also need a big picture. And we know of several companies in Switzerland, in Germany, and in other European countries that have used the Data Excellence Model, which is, by the way, published under Creative Commons license. So you can also adapt it, be it by color coding, but also by changing a little bit the symbols or the naming. So this is quite often done. And it's closely linked also to some of the other application areas. So the next one is that the model can also be used to analyze existing and emerging data management practices. So for example, when companies starting to be faced with more and more IoT data, sorry, we did several initiatives and also studies where we use the data excellence model to really go through the current level of the data management practices and also what expert would consider as being a good level of data management. So really, for example, for managing data lakes for IoT data, we have applied it several times and for very specific cases, as well as for at a company-wide scale or enterprise-wide scale or some parts of the organization. Another good example is oftentimes the traditional companies need to explain what actually it means to be more data-driven and become a data-driven company. Here, the data excellence model is used for communication and education. We have one example from a company that from the corporate, basically the internal magazine that they distribute to their employees, where they show the data excellence model, but also the different people, for example, the data architects, as well as the head of data management, for example. The data stewards are found on this page, and it's basically explained what these people do and how they work together jointly, because these are typical roles that are spread in the organization. And it's good to understand that they have to work hand in hand, and as the data excellence model also displays, it's not enough to just work on some parts. You have to basically put together all these different pieces. On the right-hand side, you have the educational aspect, which is also our training program. So we have a training program where we train data managers or new hires, for example, as well as more experienced data managers based on this body of knowledge. So this is also partly done in-house at some companies that we know. And the structure with the outer circles and the inner circles gives also the structure for the training program. And last but not least, we have basically the data excellence model as basis for benchmarking and maturity assessment. And we can move to the next page where you see that a little bit more, more detailed. A key difficulty is to understand where companies stand. And you have seen the structure of the data excellence model, also the success factors and so on. And we have developed an assessment framework, which is basically a questionnaire and an interview-based approach that helps you to assess the maturity, and you get nice color coding like green, yellow, and red traffic lights. And that helps you to, on the one hand, understand where you are, but where you also have to work on, and also monitor progress. And since many data initiatives are rather long-lasting initiatives, this is quite important to show progress and also success. And on the right-hand side, you see a benchmarking. So we have established a benchmarking database where you can then also compare your level of maturity to the level of maturity from others. Good. So far from my side, I hand over to Tobias.
All right.
For the last words and some practical experiences.
Right, and before I share the last words, let me remind you, if you do have any questions, please use the chat functionality, type in your questions, and we're more than happy to answer them. However, before we answer questions, maybe to conclude a bit on what Christina has mainly said and what we have learned from working with our member companies, but also from working with different multinational companies over the last years. Maybe to summarize the key ideas and also summarizing some good practices. First of all, we see everywhere that data management is really a journey. So it's not a one-time project. Sometimes it's a program, but typically it's really a long-lasting thing. And that means also that you need to involve multiple stakeholders. You have to inform them, you need the buy-in, which means you really have to define a big picture and you have to find the right links between all these different elements. And actually that's the core idea of that excellence model, not only telling you what to do, but also how it interrelates with each other. Second observation and key aspect from our perspective is that organizations are different. Not every organization is the same. That also means maturity is different. And the starting points for starting your data management journey is not as in other companies. That means we have seen different ways of how companies apply the data excellence model. Some start rather with the strategic perspective, others really focus on several or certain enablers of the model. All are good. You just have to pick one and be aware that it's better to start small, but also keeping in mind that this is a journey which should, at the end of the day, not only focus on several, but on all enablers of the data excellence model. Third observation relates back to the maturity assessment, which Christina presents, and relates back to the general idea of continuous improvement. We know that this is a journey. That also means that things change. If you recall the drivers, which I presented at the very beginning of this webinar, there's not only changes within data management, but there's a lot of changes within the organization, meaning you continuously have to question yourself. And that also means that you continuously have to see whether your data output suits the business and the business needs which you have. So you really need to closely find means to monitor your progress and also to find good loops of interactions and improvement. And last but not finally, there's one important element. At the end of the day, data management is very much about people. It's very much about change, because change is constant in data management. And we can only manage that change if we communicate. I'm not saying that you have to transform into change management experts. However, starting to very openly communicate also the challenges, which you definitely all have in data management, is a very first step. And it's not about communicating once. It's about communicating twice, 3 times, and even 4 times on a continuous basis. That's, from our perspective, very relevant and very important to see. And actually, that's what good or even excellent organizations really do and make. Having said this, I would like to come to the question and answers. We've seen different questions already in the chat. Christina, I just read over them. Maybe you can start picking the first.
Yeah, exactly. So I can start with one that is directly linked to what you just said. What should be the priority sequence of enablers, where to start and where to end? Actually, from our experience, it can be anything. We have seen companies that start with roles, others start more with cleaning up their applications and perhaps implementing the technological infrastructure. So for example, data catalog can be a driver, then afterwards to also work on roles and establish certain processes and so on. So it's really hard to say. And it may be also a bit, let's say, pragmatic. So you cannot, oftentimes you just have to jump on the wagon in a certain way. And there's perhaps a possibility to do something in one area and then evolve from there. But I think you should not, it's better to get started somewhere and then to fill up the different pieces than to just think about the ideal way of actually starting. So perhaps that's important. There's one other question around the role model. The roles and responsibilities of data management, it's both. So is that based on your practical experience, empirical results, or both of them? Here, what is quite interesting, perhaps, the way we work in the competence center is we have researchers, but also we have experienced data managers. And we spent the last year, or since basically 15 months, we are working together with the practitioners on a role model that reflects what is currently happening in practice. So we have their established data management roles, but as data is increasingly repurposed and that data science use cases are becoming more and more important, also a lot of this data world is changing in terms of roles. So those who provide data have to also think about the usages and who may be used or not. On the other hand, we have a lot more dynamics in analytics at the moment. And the existing roles that we had, for example, 5 years ago, they are being enriched and there are some new roles. So what we do is basically we look at what happens in the companies, we consolidate together with them the experiences and have created the role model. Exactly. Then, I saw some questions about external data and cross-company settings. So we have recently very much worked also on external data, but in different ways. So we know that data is increasingly exchanged. So inside the company, you have to get prepared. So you may need, for example, someone, I don't know, data hunter, some people say, that actually monitors which data is outside. But you also need to establish certain processes for onboarding external data. That requires also technology pieces, technology components. So it's basically amendments that we have also done partly, but certainly will also be represented in the body of knowledge in the next years. But this is a little more at the research stage. At the moment, we are doing co-innovation activities with within the competence center. I don't know, Tobias, did you have the chance to monitor a little bit the additional questions?
Right. I saw one question from Pascal Negros asking whether our information model has some formalization in a knowledge repository. Maybe to ask on that one, what we do have for our member companies is a knowledge base where they can access all the information. We are currently revising that knowledge base towards a at least semantic or graph database, meaning really outlining the interrelations between the different aspects. So that's something like an in-between answer. Yes, as of now, regular database. In future, there will be some more advanced database coming for not the public yet, but at least for our member companies.
Yeah, and from there is a meta model behind the data management body of knowledge that we have. That's part also of our research activities. And so it's formalized in the metadata model already, but not yet in the knowledge repository way. That's something we are heading for.
Right. Then Marco asked whether we can provide a few examples of data management capabilities. That is quite diverse, depends really on the company, depends on the business capabilities, and then the concrete data management actions which somehow reflect the needs. What we typically see as examples are the capability to provide transparency about data in the company, so provide transparency about available data assets. That is one capability. Another capability can be being able to describe the data you have in place, making it accessible. Another capability can be really providing training to data citizens in the sense of really making everyone aware of the relevance and the importance of data as some aspects. Actually, behind each of the enablers, and actually somehow translated from each success factor which you have seen. There's a lot of capabilities standing behind that model. More than happy to follow up with you on a more detailed level, Marco.
And there's a question from Julio Hallo, and on whether we can align a strategy with an IT strategy where the company is seeking first for an MDM platform and haven't achieved yet a certain level of maturity. Yes, this would typically be one of these areas where you start with putting in an MDM and then you evolve from the inside to the outside. But the MDM platform alone will not help the company on the long run. So probably within that frame, you will be forced to also think about your definitions of master data record, the responsible persons like the data owners, the data stewards with that, and so on. But we have seen many examples of that. That's clear. And there is a last question perhaps on what is covered in performance management. This is perhaps a little bit, needs to be explained. So this is basically the entire performance of data itself. So quality, but also how many times data is used. Also could mean the value that is created from data. So it's the entire KPI system that you need to put in place around data.
Okay. Christine, for the sake of time, I see it's already 44. We've already seen different questions which we have not answered yet. For the sake of time, I would like to make a cut here. We will answer every question which we did not do verbally now. So the chat is already copied, and you will get these answers then via email. Actually, I would like to have some closing words. We very much enjoyed having you as guests in the first webinar. As already said at the very beginning, that's the start of a series of webinars. You can stay in contact with us. The next option will be on August 13, where we will detail the data strategies and actually the CDQ data strategy canvas. Plus, there will be also another webinar on data catalogs. That's the first option to stay in touch with us. The second one is, Christina already mentioned the CDQ Academy. If you would like to deep dive into the topics and get more details around all the aspects of the data excellence model and also of the concepts and methods and good practices insights which have been gathered in the Competence Center, that's the place to go. You see the dates there. Actually, September 1st and 3rd, from 1st to 3rd, will be an online academy. So in Corona times, that will be completely virtual. Feel free to register for that CDQ Academy as well. You see the link down there. As said, you will receive the information. And third, and maybe most intense way of staying in touch with us is becoming part of the CDQ expert community. In case you're interested in joining, also learning more from different companies, from the experts, from very mature multinational companies, but also getting in a more in-depth exchange and discussion with the research team, you're more than welcome to reach out to me for that one. Apart from that, we have a quite diverse knowledge base, as we also outlined. Some of the readings are available to the public, and actually you see some examples here. There's a lot of knowledge accumulated in the last 14 years, and we're more than happy to provide at least some glimpses. I look forward to seeing you at one of the next webinars, at a CDQ Academy, or maybe even as part of the CDQ network. Thank you very much for attending. Christina, thank you for guiding us through the data excellence model, and see you very soon. Bye-bye.